Welcome to the Columbia 911 Communications District Board of Directors regular meeting here September 23rd, 2021. At this time we'll do roll call. I see Mr. Anderson is here, Mr. Heimmuller by Zoom, and myself, Sean Clark, and our newest board member, Shelley Hennessy. Thank you. How about Bruce?
Bruce
is in.
He's on. Okay.
Yep.
Welcome.
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you, Bruce. All right, at this time we are going to take public comment. Do we have public comment? Yes, sir, Mr. Miller.
Sean, I do have public comment. I may have missed it. Are we expecting Board Member Heimmuller to attend?
He's on Zoom.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Columbia 911 Communications District Board of Directors and staff. For the record, my name is Tyler Miller, and I'm a city councilor with the city of Scappoose. Last Monday, September 20th, the City Council voted to appoint me as the city's liaison to Columbia 911 Communications District. I'm here today in that official capacity. The vote to appoint me as the city's liaison came after city officials reviewed parts of the August 10th, 2021 draft report by Federal Engineering. I have reviewed the report multiple times as well. It wasn't until yesterday, September 22nd, the final Federal Engineering report and an additional document titled Next Gen Radio System Report Presentation were made available and posted on the Columbia 911 website. I am here today on the city's behalf asking that the Columbia 911 Board of Directors to delay any decision or direction related to Federal Engineering's report. The delay would be to allow the public and your partner agencies time to read the latest materials, digest the materials, ask questions, and give input to this 911 agency's executive director and, where necessary, the board of directors. I have heard from the heads of fire department and police departments throughout the county that are concerned with the Federal Engineering report, with what the Federal Engineering report contains, including the recommendations. Specifically, there is a major concern regarding partnering with a much larger county such as Clark County for the Caressa radio system or Washington County for the WACA radio system. Joining either of those systems would inherently bind our small county of about 52,000 population to a county with over 500,000 or a county with over 600,000 population. History is telling. Those counties have different radio system needs 10 to 15 years ahead of Columbia County, and we simply cannot be at their mercy when it comes to such a critical component of Columbia County's public safety emergency system. This agency and the user agencies would have no control over Caressa or WACA moving or completely decommissioning a radio site or sites that Columbia County agencies rely on for critical emergency communications. We would likely have no control to tell them they can't upgrade their radio system to address their own public safety radio needs. The Federal Engineering report also only addresses a budget for 10 years to pay for system maintenance costs, portable radio costs, and the monthly or annual service fees Caressa or WACA would charge for each and every radio used by agencies in this county. That literally amounts to millions of taxpayer dollars. There's a well-known published industry standard lifespan of 7 to 10 years for portable radios and mobile radios. There's no budget included after year 10 to address that aspect either. Additionally, the Scappoose Police Department was left off the equipment budget section on the August 10th report, which equates to around $400,000 that is not accounted for. The second significant concern I'm hearing from agency administrators is the major lack of sufficient portable radio coverage. Agencies all over the nation are ensuring their public safety radio system is covering their service area with a minimum of 95% portable talk-in radio coverage. And that's a 3.4 DAC, which means delivered audio quality. For those that don't know, it's a standard within usually the P25 category. As this board is aware, the number one request from the public safety agency administrators in this county and the work group members is much better portable radio coverage. That is their number one most important request. The request does not list a single solution that addresses, the report does not list a single solution that addresses that request. The recommended system gives only 60% portable radio talking coverage. I'm quite certain that we have better than 60% portable radio coverage with our current system, despite what the maps in the report indicates. We would be going backwards in coverage, and 60, 70, or even 80% is not acceptable number when 95% portable, not mobile coverage is the well-established standard created all over the nation. While the Next Gen Radio System Report presentation paper, which is this paper right here that appeared on the Columbia 911 website, I saw it last night. It wasn't there the day before, so I don't know when it was added. Report indicates that the report is for the budgetary purposes. The number and location of radio sites is likely the #1 factor determining the radio system's cost. At 60% radio coverage, it is very apparent additional sites will be needed. Additional sites range from about $1 million to more than $3 million per site. Without knowing how many sites will be needed to accomplish a much higher portable radio talking coverage scenario, the budgetary numbers of the report cannot be relied upon for any real planning as is. I want to point your attention to a comment board member Henry Heimler made in this room on February 25th, 2021. This comment can be found in the meeting minutes. The board minutes state as follows. Heimler stated that we do not necessarily need them being the engineering firm, to validate what we're doing, but to truly do an analysis of what the district has and what we want to accomplish. I applaud board member Heimler for his comments. With that comment in mind, I want to now point your attention to page 3 of the Federal Engineering Report under the header System Alternatives. The first sentence starts out by saying, per the direction of the district. Per the attention of the district. Federal Engineering developed 4 alternatives for this board's consideration. 4 alternatives. They were tasked with keeping their scope to 4 systems. Page 2 of the Next Gen Radio System Report presentation, again, this document right here, states, what this report represents is the professional opinion of a recognized multinational engineering firm who, based on years of experience working with all manufacturers, countless customers, not unlike Columbia 911, who took methodical steps to provide the board of Columbia 911 a solution that is within their best interest. This report only reflects the opinion and review of what federal engineering was allowed and directed to look at, which is a very small number of options, and more than likely, none are the solution for this county. Federal engineering should have not been giving the constraints they were giving, and instead a much broader, practical, step-by-step review of each individual core component that makes up a public safety radio system, so we could truly find the best solution for our public safety responders and the public served. On page 2 of the Next Gen Radio System Report presentation document, third bullet, there's a comment there that made my eyebrows go up a bit. And I hope you as elected board members take issue with it as well. When we're talking about millions of taxpayer dollars, it would be my expectation, and I believe the expectation of my fellow city council members and the community we represent, that this project does in fact go out for RFP to at least add another option to find the best deal for the public safety responders and the taxpayers. As elected officials, we have both a legal and ethical responsibility to the taxpayers to be nothing but the best steward of taxpayer dollars. Again, I ask this board to please delay any decision or direction until at least the next board meeting, if not the board meeting after. I have sent Mr. Fletcher an email asking for a meeting where we can sit down and the city can get questions answered. My next step from there will be to request a meeting with each 911 board member so we can more thoroughly explain the city's concerns and we can have a constructive dialogue as elected officials. I can go into a lot more detail and concern, but I'll end with this. The city of Scappoose does seek to be a partner with the 911 agency, and we'd like to be involved in getting support from federal engineering we can all feel very comfortable with and support with a unified message to our taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Okay. Next on the agenda, do we have any additions to the agenda? All right. Hearing none, we will move into the federal engineering presentation. Welcome.
Thank you, sir. Today we present to the board a final report and recommendation to help assist you on selecting a replacement solution for our aging public safety radio system. The district contracted the services of federal engineering, whose scope and deliverables are as follows. Review of our existing LMR system, which included the reviewing of the existing sites, equipment, any previous system evaluations and studies. Review of the next gen radio RFI published by Columbia 911. Review of the 3 qualified bidders and the 4 solutions presented to the district. Conduct meetings and interviews of 911 user agencies and the C911 Next Gen Radio Work Group. Interview the 3 RFI vendors who submitted potential solutions. Provide an independent evaluation of the merits and detractors of the 4 potential solutions. Provide an official recommendation to the Board of Columbia 911, and to provide a realistic budgetary estimate for a 10-year fiscal impact for bond consideration. At this time, I'm going to introduce the staff of Federal Engineering and allow them to introduce themselves and their history and FE and present their presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Rajit Javer. I'm Director of Operations with Federal Engineering. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. With me I have Luis Camarillo. He's the technical lead on the project. And in the back there is Jeff Paré, who's one of our account executives. So Federal Engineering's been, it's an independent firm. We've been in the business over 35 years at this point. We're a nationwide firm based out of DC. We're all geographically kind of separated all over the country. Luis is out of the Houston area. I'm out of Phoenix. Jeff's out of Sacramento, and we have many consultants all over. We specialize in land mobile radio, public safety communications, and also in next generation 911 CAD RMS type systems. So we have a wealth of experience, many ongoing projects at the same time, so we like to bring that experience to each engagement. Of course, each engagement is unique, the situation, the environment, and so forth, and we'll be going through a fair bit of that here to help understand where things are at currently for Columbia County 911, and one welcome question. So as I'm going through, if you have a question on a particular slide or anything like that, please feel free to ask a question. I'll do my best to address it. Any questions before we get going?
Just
Yes.
real quick pause here. I apologize. Mr. Miller had public comment. Gentlemen, did you have public comment to make? I'm sorry. Okay.
Well, I would like to say something, as a matter of fact.
I'm sorry about that. Go ahead.
First, Joel Medina, I'm the fire chief for Columbia River Fire Rescue. Just so that we can frame this out of who I am and the agency that I represent. Columbia River Fire Rescue provides services to 4 municipalities in Columbia County: St. Helens, Columbia City, Prescott, and Rainier. We cover 185 square miles. We're the largest agency in Columbia County, which is one of the reasons that we're here. I have to tell you, Mr. Miller does bring up a lot of concerns that we have had as public safety agencies for the systems and for the process that have been presented. But I do have to commend Mr. Fletcher for getting us all together in the same room to discuss many of the problems that Mr. Miller did brought up and some of the shortcomings that do exist. We did present concerns from our individual districts and issues that we believe affect us now and for foreseeability. We asked for milestone markers and to be identified along with consequences for failure to meet milestone markers. Mr. Fletcher was very receptive. He was able to get all the fire chiefs together in the same room and get us to talk about the topics that are essential for the service that we provide. And to that end, I was very happy to see the solidarity that exists between fire and Columbia County Communications. And this is a very challenging topic that we have up here, because the decisions that are made in the upcoming months don't just impact this county today, but will impact it for years to come. So the decision does have to have a lot of transparencies and to consider a lot of the foreseeability of issues that we already have dealt with, which are all things that were brought up in the meeting that Mr. Fletcher set up. I believe we're moving in the right direction, and I appreciate the board and all the consideration that's being done to provide us the service that we need, because we need the communication to provide the service that we do here. We can't do it with 2 cups and a piece of string. And sometimes, I have to tell you, it feels like that. And that is not any particular fault of any individual with Columbia County Communications, but rather with the infrastructure that is now long outdated and does need to be addressed. So these are tough decisions to be made, and I appreciate the board looking at it with a broad spectrum and including the service providers in that aspect to make those decisions, because at the end of the day, we gotta be able to talk to each other. Columbia County's gotta, Columbia River Fire Rescue's gotta talk to Scappoose, and Scappoose has gotta talk to Vernonia, and vice versa. So I appreciate that. I just wanted to say that I echo many of the concerns that Mr. Miller has made from Scappoose. We've all discussed it, talked it. Those provisions and those issues were provided to Mr. Fletcher, who was very receptive about trying to get us the information that we needed before we move forward. So one of the reasons that we're here is representing the district. I'm here with my operations chief, because these are all vital for the decisions that I have to make for the organization and for operations, to hear what we have to say. So you'll excuse my impromptu kind of comments, but I just wanted to everybody know that we have a vested interest in this, and it's very important to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief. Apologies, Raji. Back to you.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone. So as far as the agenda today, I want to go over the methodology that Federal Engineering used to go through the process of the analysis. Go through the system alternatives, that was part of our scope. Look at comparison of the alternatives. How do they compare to one another? What are the pros and cons? What our recommendation is, and then next steps. And next steps will delve into next steps for both the recommendation, but next steps, again, this is a discussion, I do agree about that. It's not a one solution for sure type of deal. So next steps will delve into what would next steps look like if you did an RFP, what would next steps look like if you joined a regional system. So we'll walk through that as well. So as far as the assessment of the existing system, Mr. Fletcher provided a great deal of documentation that we were able to review and get up to speed, and then also went through a requirements workshop with stakeholders to understand what those requirements are and make sure it meets the needs of the stakeholders that are part of the district. We evaluated 3 proposals that were provided to us by Mr. Fletcher. They were from Motorola, Codan, and Tate, and evaluated that, and we'll kind of dig into that a little bit further. But they did have different solutions, and that's kind of what drove some of the alternatives that were within our scope. And then we, of course, performed coverage analysis both of the existing system to understand where the coverage issues are currently and try to address that in these alternatives. So then we developed essentially the requirements that were key that came out of the workshop were the coverage requirements. 95% district-wide mobile radio coverage throughout the county would include in-building coverage in population centers. And some of the percentages you're going to see later with respect to portable coverage are actually the in-building in the population centers to kind of reflect what that looks like. Also capacity. Obviously, systems only as good as being able to access it. And so we had a public safety grade of service of 1% or less, which means anyone who's a first responder will receive a busy 1% of the time or less. Typically, it's much less during even the busy periods, so that everyone has access when they need it to the system. And then, of course, looking at, because I think was already mentioned, the age of the system and so forth, we're looking at replacing all that equipment, the repeaters that are over at the sites, the antenna systems, the consoles that are used by dispatch operators, and so forth. So the four alternatives that were contracted with FE, with the district, were as follows. There's the building of standalone district-owned VHF system. That one would be completely district-owned, and we'll go into some of the details of that shortly. The other one was building of a standalone district-owned 700 megahertz system. So that would, of course, change the frequency band from VHF to 700, but again, the district would own it and operate it. And then we were told to look at the CRESA, the Clark Regional System, which is an 800 megahertz system. So again, that's a changing of band, but also then joining that cooperative regional system. And then the Washington County consolidated system, which is also 800 megahertz. And we'll go into some of the differences between these on a later slide. So what we wanted to do was take those key requirements that were gathered during the stakeholder workshop and apply that to the different alternatives. So what were the key requirements related to? Of course, coverage first and foremost. We know that be able to access the system, you first need to have radio coverage in that area. Second is channel capacity, which we just touched on, that making sure that the system's not overloaded. System architecture, does it have the redundancy, the resiliency that you need? You don't want just a single point of failure or anything of that nature. Site improvements, of course, some of the sites require some improvement in order to be hardened to be able to support public safety grade communications. Subscribers, I think that was also mentioned previously. You have to go through subscriber life cycle replacement and so forth. And if you're, of course, switching bands or switching technologies, subscribers would need to be purchased and programmed. And then the budgetary costs for each of the alternatives. So at a high level, here's a chart of kind of the comparisons. I'll go kind of row by row. Of course, the columns are the different alternatives. So as far as ownership and control, there's no doubt. Alternative 1, which is a VHF system owned by the district, or Alternative 2, which is 700 megahertz system owned by the district, allow the district to have complete and full control of that system, because it would be basically deployed by the district, it would be operated by the district, and so forth. Alternative 3 and 4, which are the regional systems, of course, there would be a shared control. The district would have a voice in the operation of that system, but they each have their own governance structures to basically set the direction of each of those systems. Technology-wise, Alternative 1 was as scoped, was an analog conventional technology. Alternative 2 was a P25, so it allowed for digital communication, but it was still a conventional. And then Alternative 3 and 4 were both trunked technologies because that's what those systems operate currently, with the CRESA system being phase 1, they call it, and Alternative 4, with the WACA system being a phase 2 technology. Now, to the user, there's not going to be any real difference between phase 1 and phase 2. It's more of a design and operational perspective from the technology, but the user, a trunk system would, a P25 trunk to the user would between phase 1 and phase 2, there would be really no difference to the user, being at the end user radio user level or even at the dispatch console level. Of course, the spectrum is different. You're going from VHF to 700 megahertz and then 800 megahertz for those two regional alternatives. And then the mobile radio coverage, which, as we talked about, with 95% at a minimum, Alternative 1 hits that. Alternative 2, 3, and 4 exceed that to varying levels. And then the in-building coverage, this is the one I was talking, this is a portable in-building in the population centers, because we know first responders need to go into buildings and be able to communicate and so forth. So these percentages here reflect not the portable on-street, but the portable in-building. As you see, the first alternative has a very weak in-building coverage. Part of it has to do with the spectrum. VHF is known to have less penetration into buildings compared to 700 and 800 megahertz. And the rest of it is, of course, placement of sites and number of sites and so forth that make up those particular systems. So you can see Alternative 2 has the highest in-building penetration coverage at 75%, and then the two regional alternatives are at 60 and 65% respectively. Going more into some of the features that differentiate the different alternatives. So alternative one, really no added features to what you have today. Really, of course, enhances coverage, new equipment, and so forth, but nothing from a feature perspective. Alternative two, because it's digital, it of course allows for P25 standard features as well as encryption. So should law enforcement especially typically want some type of encryption, the AES is a known encryption standard that could be added to their channels and so forth. Alternative three, because it's P25 and it's trunked, takes what you have in alternative two and then adds more features such as OTAR, which is over-the-air rekeying, which allows you to continually update your encryption over whatever that operationally you want to do every 3 months or every month or so forth. Global positioning system, of course, so unit location services, and then of course smartphone integration, which allows typically command staff, but even others, if they're at a conference or just outside of the radio coverage footprint, to still be able to access the system through their smartphone by having an app there and having the system and authentication set up so they can access certain talk groups in their system, so they're kind of aware of what's going on in the event of they're out of town or again out of the coverage footprint. And it can be expanded to beyond command staff as well. And alternative four is the same. The only difference is the WACA system does have over-the-air programming enabled as well. So that allows for, typically it works best for more smaller changes in programming. It would not be the most suitable situation to just reprogram a radio holistically, but if there's small, subtle changes, a new talk group added or something of that nature, over-the-air programming can capture that without having to go and touch the radio. So as far as from a portable and mobile radio perspective, what does this mean? So the alternative one would allow you to reuse existing VHF radios. Now understanding there are different parts of the life cycle, so those normal life cycle updates and replacements would have to occur, but you're not mandated to go out there and just go and wholeheartedly buy new mobile and portable radios for alternative one VHF. Alternative two would require, especially with keeping the VHF in play with neighboring jurisdictions and so forth, dual band radios that are VHF and 700 megahertz capable. And then alternative 3 and 4 are the same, because again, you'd be essentially joining a regional system that operates in 100, but you want to have that ability to communicate with your VHF partners. So that's where the subscriber radio differentials are. The cost is Louis is going to go into a lot more detail, but this is just a very high level cost differential between the different alternatives, and I will turn it over to Louis to do a deeper dive on that.
Right, so as was described, the cost analysis is based on our in-house tool, which has been developed and maintained for over 35 years. Hundreds of different types of system types and configurations and technologies, and also backhaul networks that support them, as well as dispatch consoles, subscriber units, and maintenance, et cetera, et cetera. So using that, and also 3 other assumptions is that that go into the analysis, is that we take as was described, the documentation, we look at that, we see what can be reused, we see what needs replacement. So taking the information, that's one input into the cost analysis. We also know what has been offered in the past by different vendors and what's currently offered today. So we keep up to date with the solutions that are available. So that's another factor that we consider. And as well as what you'll see in these numbers when I go through them is that they are non-discounted list pricing, meaning there's no type of discounts that we've added, whether it's a state contract, whether it's another regional system contract, or any other WISCA contracts, because it's difficult to predict what the vendors would propose if you went out to RFP, or if you went to, build your own system. It would be difficult to forecast that. So our numbers are conservative in nature, so that any vendor pricing you get do not exceed our estimates. And I'll go through this. It's a very busy table, but I'll go through on a column by column basis. And each one of these alternatives in the report is about 3 to 4 pages of assumptions. And essentially what that does is it lists the conceptual design parameters that were used to build these numbers. So it's on a modular basis, on a component by component basis. And I do want to say that they include equipment and services. So for example, the radio system cost for alternative 1, VHF, 3.9 million. The assumption there is that we call that a refresh of what's there today. Essentially replacing the repeaters, the antenna systems, but not adding any additional sites. So just replacing what's in place today. And same with the dispatch consoles, we talked about end of life, so we've considered replacement of those. What's unique about alternative 1 as the low cost solution is that we are reusing the backhaul network. We're not adding any sites. And same with subscriber units, as Rajit said, you don't need to go and purchase new subscriber units, as we're not changing spectrum or technology. So same analog VHF, you can leverage those investments, and you can save some money. And we took input from those reports from the previous studies to make our site improvement assumptions as to what needs to be upgraded at any of the sites, even support adding any, just new antennas, and there's conditions that need to be addressed so that, you can have a system that's reliable. We want to improve the system reliability, and so there are needed site improvements, and we included that. So, in summary, for alternative 1, you see the total cost of ownership of 8.4. Yes, we took a 10-year system life cycle approach. So we added what we consider system maintenance fees, well, not fees, but just system maintenance costs for alternative 1. For replacing all that equipment, we look at technical support, on-site support, software upgrades, and cybersecurity too. So that's what's enrolled, encompassed in the $2 million for system maintenance on alternative 1. So that, in a nutshell, is that alternative. It is the low-cost solution. And then we move into the other ones. In alternative 2, we said that you change frequency and you change technology. You go to P25. It's digital, but it's not trunked. It's still conventional, and it is district-owned. So then you have to procure all the system control equipment. So that really drives the cost up in terms of all the equipment that's needed to install a brand new system that controls the new radio system, as well as that one required a lot more sites than the other alternatives. And so I believe that one was 9 sites, 7 channels. And some of the components are the same across the board, such as dispatch consoles. Regardless of the technology of the alternative, you're going to need to replace dispatch consoles. So that's across the board the same. For backhaul, we're adding sites. We're leveraging some of the sites. And so in the 700, our constellation of sites uses some of the existing sites. We use some of the backhaul network and add new links, microwave links, to the additional sites. So that's why that one does have an additional backhaul cost that alternative 1 does not. And then you need new network management equipment. Because there's new sites that are not part of your current sites, there's more site improvements for alternative 2. And then Rajit said, new dual band P25 radios are needed for alternative 2. And while we're there, I'll just say that that's P25. The other ones are also P25, but you add a layer of system functionality. So with alternative 2, it's P25 conventional. And that's where you could say the lower cost of the P25 solutions. Alternative 3, you add phase 1 trunking. Alternative 4, you add phase 2 trunking. So there's added software costs. And but it's the same equipment counts, but just the added software costs. And there again, same as alternative 1, we calculated the 10-year system maintenance cost.
Excuse me,
Implementing
Louis?
700.
Can
Yes.
I ask a question? Can you speak to the 10-year? You said life cycle. Is that the expected life cycle of the system, or?
Well, no, I mean, that, you can do 15-year, you can do 10. So it really depends on, I guess, what budgeting, how you want to, when you go into negotiations with contractors, you can, pay up front. It can be either an O&M cost or a capital cost up front as to how much of the optional post-warranty system support you want to purchase.
Yeah.
I was speaking more to the lifespan of
the system itself.
Yeah.
Typically we recommend about 15 years. So we recommend, by year 10 or 11 of the current system, you start budgeting for a future system, whatever it looks like. Now, does it mean it has to be replaced in 15 years? Probably not, but it's pretty much what most of the vendors are estimating the life cycle of their current products. The one good thing that's a little bit different from the systems that have been in place the last 10 or 15 years is with all these vendors, and it's captured in some of these maintenance costs, is you're upgrading the things that need upgrading more regularly. Those are the servers, the routers, the switches. So things like that are getting upgraded because we know how quickly Cisco equipment, for example, gets obsolete and so forth. What's not getting replaced is those repeaters at the sites and all that type of stuff. So it does buy you some time in that by having those upgrades on a much more 2-3 year life cycle basis, as opposed to just the whole system being swapped out at a certain point in time.
Thank you.
I'd also add a couple things that are part of that rationale. Exactly everything that Rajit and Louis said. You look at the system life cycle, and it doesn't mean that it's dead at 10 years, 1 day. The other thing that we consider from the district's perspective is budgetary, bonding. So when you look at bond terms, bond rates, tax rates, you throw a dart sometimes at a wall and say, what is rational, reasonable for the taxpayers to be committed to? And bond rates and terms can vary, but a sweet spot is often that 10-year mark. So doesn't mean that none of this is in concrete. It's just this is concepts.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we'll move on to the third and fourth alternatives, which there's similarities. In one of the biggest one is, of course, leveraging an existing system, an existing regional system. So you will see that the radio system costs are lower because you're leveraging what they have as their system control equipment. And we know it's Motorola, so we can say that their core network is being leveraged. And it would be a shared resource, and the district can connect to that. That would provide the call processing capabilities of the district's radio system. And it also, because there's already sites in the region that provide coverage into the district boundary, the PSAP boundary, it actually only requires 4 additional sites for Crescent, for alternative 3. And as we spoke before, same dispatch consoles. We are adding, those 4 sites though are different. You have to connect to their regional system, so you have to have additional backhaul links to connect to their regional system, plus the 4 additional sites that are not part of, a couple of them are not part of the existing sites. So long story short, a higher backhaul cost to connect the regional system to the district system, plus adding a couple of more sites. Again, they already have network management capabilities. You're just adding additional points to be monitored in the new district subsystem. So there's just a minimal cost to add network management to the new equipment that the district would have in the service area. Same with site improvements. Additional costs there to build and upgrade the sites to support the new equipment. We talked about subscriber units. It's phase 1, trunking capable, dual band. And this would be VHF and 800 would be the difference between the capabilities. And here, the difference between, obviously, the first two and the third alternative is there are user fees based on discussions we had with the Cresa representatives that gave us numbers based on their current user fees today. And so we calculated that for the amount of users that would be using their system, that adds to the 10-year total cost of ownership. So that one has a price point of 19.5. And the last one, again, like I said, similar, using somebody else's core network. But the difference in the radio system cost is that that regional system is geographically further away. You need more sites in the region, in your district boundary, to provide the same level or comparable coverage levels to meet the user requirements in that alternative. So more sites are needed for the radio system. And also with the phase 2 capability, it's more software on the repeater side and the subscriber unit side that's needed, which drives the cost of the system and the user cost. And because of more sites, more site improvements, so that's reflected there, and a couple of more sites, the network management as well goes up, and same with backhaul. Now the difference here is that they had slightly lower user fees with WACA than Cresa, but because of the higher amount of equipment that's needed, the system maintenance costs are also higher, so that's proportionate there. So you see the differences. You have the low cost as alternative 1, the high cost being alternative 4, and I would like to say that alternative 2, that one is based, what we said again, as a phase 1 conventional system. If we were to convert that to a trunking system, that number would actually go up and could be as high or higher than alternative 4. So there's something to take into consideration when evaluating your options. And obviously, alternative 3, cheaper than alternative 4. That's what I have, Reggie.
Okay, thanks, Louis. So brings us to our recommendation, and again, as been mentioned by Mr. Fletcher, nothing here is set in stone. This is based on, again, our independent analysis of all the alternatives that we were scoped to do, looking at everything from the design, the technology, the user, how do they match up to the stakeholder needs that we captured, and the cost, of course. And based on that, we believe that Cresa checked all the boxes essentially, and what it did was it provided coverage that was stated to us through the requirements. Can coverage be improved? Absolutely. Could you add another site to this is not locked in design. Could you add a site or two if there's some key points that didn't get captured through the stakeholder assessment, and you go up to actually pursue this piece, you could absolutely add a couple of sites and still be at a lower cost point than many of the other alternatives. So, again, we believe it can provide the coverage needed. As Louis said, because of the location of adjacency to the district of the sites there's fewer sites needed by the district to be able to latch onto the system, and there can always be a couple more added. It's the lowest cost to migrate to a different frequency band. One of the issues that's known in the VHF spectrum, and VHF serves a very important purpose, but it is more susceptible to things like interference, and it's just the nature of the physics of the spectrum. Part of it is VHF is the oldest spectrum, and so they never had a transmit frequency and a receive. I don't want to get too technical, but basically what you want to do is pair up frequencies And VHF does not have that. You just get one frequency, you try to get another, and so forth. When they got to UHF, they paired up frequencies. 7800 is very well managed and well paired, which again helps to mitigate any types of interference, not only from yourself, but from external systems. So that was the lowest cost to migrate to a different frequency band. And then no matter what, you have to look at the interoperability pieces because no one works in a silo. And by having a dual band radio, you'd be able to interoperate with all your VHF partners as well as all the Cresa and other 800 megahertz trunk radio system P25 partners. So it actually expands your pool of interoperability compared to where you are today. So I have a couple of slides on next steps. So this is pursuing a Cresa alternative, or you can substitute WACA for it. I just want to kind of explain the process, and then the next slide will go into should the district decide to go on its own for a system. So really key things, of course, we all know funding. That's always the big hurdle to overcome, but you know, funding is of course a key issue for any of these options. And then really beginning the dialogue with Cresa or WACA, should it be, as was pointed out by Lewis. In this case, both the vendors for both those systems is Motorola. And so really what it entails is, as opposed to an RFP, because an RFP is supposed to be, hey, if we want all the vendors to respond, well, if you have Motorola equipment that's already installed in the system and you're adding on to the system, you have to go with that vendor. So really all you can do there is a functional specifications for the additional sites. So they still have to meet the coverage requirements, they still have to meet certain parameters that you define, but essentially that functional specification, that directed procurement would go towards Motorola to respond. And then you procure that and then go through the regular implementation of the system with, of course, input from Cresa or WACA, depending on who you're going with, and of course the vendor in order to migrate onto that system. So it's a multi-year process, and you know, it's basically at the time it's complete and everything's tested and the users are happy on the new system, then you can decommission or repurpose your existing system. So this is the general approach for joining a regional system, which is going to differ on a few steps from the next slide I present. Should the district decide, you know what, we want to go our own way, we want the autonomy of having our own system, we want to be in a particular band, we want, whatever the needs are, and that's perfectly fine. Similar steps will still have to be taken. Looking at, whatever that cost of that system looks like. Let's say it was the 700 megahertz P25 conventional, it was about a 20 million price point. Well, I do think when you go your own way and you're not locked into a vendor because of it being a regional system, absolutely the RFP process is the best way to go. It allows the most competition, best price point, best interest of the district. And so the next step after getting funding is to develop a RFP and put it out on the street to get proposals from vendors, and then evaluate those proposals, see which proposer has the best design at the best price point, and then go into contract with them. And then of course, again, implement that new system, and then all the different phases of the implementation, including the new radios that would go out, the cutover and acceptance of those systems, and then eventually a decommission. So as you can see, next step with either of these is kind of select the direction and get the funding, and then it's a matter of, depending on which direction you'd like to go, whether you want to go the RFP route or a directed procurement and negotiation with the existing regional partners. So with that said, open discussion time. Any other questions?
Hearing none, I'm going to jump in there a little bit. So thank you, Rajit. That was great. Just for the board's perspective, a couple of things to remind you that the distinction between what this report is and what it is not are really important for you to understand. This report is not a radio system design. nor is the report a project plan or a contract for any single solution. The coverage maps that were found within the document are conceptual in nature. The maps may and will vary slightly or greatly depending on which system is selected. Better representation of coverage maps and expected radio transmit and receive performance will come with a true system design by the vendor who is ultimately selected. Further, any decisions on a specific vendor and radio solution will include a full accounting of all equipment required for said system. That includes different sites, different tower requirements, microwave backhaul pathways. Full accounting of subscriber radios will be included with any new system design. So, repeating, what this report does represent is the professional opinions of a recognized multinational engineering firm who, based on years of experience working with all manufacturers and countless customers, who took methodical steps to provide the board a recommendation. That was their scope. Rajit did a fine job, as I was explaining to him this morning. Their presentation and my presentation were done in silos. Right? We didn't compare notes. But at the end of the day, when we shared each other's, it was like, wow, they're mirrors. So I'm not going to repeat a whole bunch of things because Rajit really covered options as I did in my document too. But in closing, I want to take a moment to acknowledge and thank the staff of Federal Engineering who worked with me and the Next Gen Radio Work Group and all of our stakeholders during these past several months. FE was most responsive, open, and available to myself and our user group. The questions they asked us were clear, concise, and their ability to speak to us as a group in layman's terms regarding highly complex and technical issues was greatly appreciated. Their open reception to input from our work group was evident to all. No questions were too small, and it is noted the steps that FE took to ensure that our needs and expectations were being met are recognized. And a final thank you to the Next Gen Radio Work Group for their active participation and their ever-present positive outlook and willingness to invest their time in the planning for a new future radio system. This district looks forward to the next steps and their continued participation. So, thank you.
Mr. Chair, this is Henry. I have some questions.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Sorry, I missed the window a second ago. I couldn't get off of mute there quickly enough. But I had one question. First of all, is we're talking about the 700 on the option number 2, 700 standalone, our own system. Did I miss something in there as to why we would need to go 700 versus 800? I know that it seems like those big systems are 800. I assume there must be a cost issue there, but can we clarify that piece first of all?
So I'll take the first stab at that, Henry. So the scope that FE looked at, what we asked them to look at is what we have received through the RFI process that we had already concluded. So they looked at the options that were presented to the district through that RFI process. So that included the VHF from from Codan, the 700 system via the Tate proposal, and then 800, which was proposed by Motorola. And the only difference between those two Motorola solutions is their hosted systems. It's interesting to note that all of the vendors who participated in the RFI could sell us a standalone VHF system, trunked or not trunked. Only one proposed VHF because that's frankly all they sell. Am I missing something? Nobody proposed a VHF trunk system. Nobody proposed anything else other than the scope that we gave FE. Rajeet, do you want to add something?
Yes, just one thing to add, yeah, you're absolutely right, and the only thing I would say is there's really not much difference between 800 and 700. So should, for whatever reason, the district says, oh, we want to go our own way and we don't want to do 700, we want to do 800, that's perfectly fine. It's really based on frequency availability at the time. There should be frequencies in both spectrum, but deeper dive would have to be done. Definitely 700, there is availability. So, but it's indifferent in the sense of the radios, the repeater equipment, everything that you would purchase for almost everything you would purchase for a 700 megahertz system would also be applicable for 800. Maybe some variants in the antennas and so forth, but overall it's interchangeable.
Okay, thank you. And I guess back to the VHF point, and I'm not advocating for VHF or against it one way or the other, but I would also have to say that if I were a dealer and I sold an $8 million product and I also sold a $22 million product, I would certainly encourage the buyer to buy the $22 million product. So that piece of it doesn't sway me as much, other than the fact that it's good marketing on somebody's part as well. The other thing I just kind of wonder, and I've thought this since we first started this conversation years ago, I'm really going to have to weigh the value of standalone versus partnering, because I feel like there are values to some of the things that we do when we partner with our neighboring agencies, but it makes me a little concerned that if we invest in this radio system and we're partnered with Cresa or Washington County, and then all of a sudden 5 years from now they decide that they're going to do a major rehab and dig in and change their whole system, we're going to kind of be in a situation where we have to follow along even if we don't particularly want to or have the funds to do it. I'm a little concerned with being tied in like that, and it's not because I feel like we have to wave our independence flag here. I'm just I'm mostly concerned about the true needs of Columbia County residents, and not necessarily have to be the tail that's being wagged by a dog. So that's just my points on this so far, and without having a whole lot of time to digest this, I do want to thank FE for their presentation, though.
Thank you, Henry. Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Sorry. I'm going to reference a couple of page numbers in the report. So on page 116, if you could just educate me a little bit. So why on the 700 and 800 megahertz is the mobile talk out less than the mobile talk in?
Oh, you mean on the coverage perspective?
Yes.
Okay.
So I mean, that's the opposite of VHF, like what we have now. So I was curious, why does that flip-flop to the higher spectrums?
Because with 7 and 800 megahertz, you typically could use, and that was part of that design, a tower top amplifier, which you cannot do with VHF because of noise and other interference issues. So what happens is and it really helps, it's a good point you make out about mobile. On the portable side, it really helps because a portable radio is a lower power than a mobile radio, as you know. But what happens is because of that tower top amplifier, there is a little bit better coverage, talk in versus talk out.
Okay, so basically like a preamp in a radio.
Correct.
Okay. Next question on 118, where you do summarize the coverage geographically of the area.
Yep.
Now, I did work in Multnomah County, early 90s, so I worked in that 800 system.
Yep.
Know all of its bells and whistles, all the nice fun things you can do with it. But at the end of the day, my question is if the number one concern our end users have had for years has always been being able to access on the radio. What is the reason that if it shows that our own system, 700 megahertz, would be 75% coverage, why are we looking at, or why did you recommend Cresa, which currently says it's only going to be 60%?
Sure. So it's fair question. So that's again the portable in-building and population centers. Another site or even two will, and not a $2 million site. I'm talking about like existing sites that you could leverage to locate some stuff would put that well into the 70+%. It's just for the purposes of meeting a mobile coverage and not having a design target per se for the portable in-building urban area or population center coverage. It was just more of a methodology of comparison. So could the Cresa or WACA get as good as the 700 your own? Absolutely, but it will add some cost to what those budgetary numbers are. So it would probably get it closer to what a 700 megahertz your own system, like so for example, Cresa's at a couple million cheaper now. If you add 2-3 sites, you know, you can get a lot closer to that number. And that's why I was saying there is room for, this is not a firm design, but there is room for that type of thing because absolutely, if you, and especially when you start looking at maps and you say, oh, I really need something in this pocket here, I'm not getting the coverage. It might be in all the alternatives that you're not getting that coverage. Then, you know, when you get to that point where you're actually going to have a vendor build and design the system, you definitely want to get that addressed.
Okay, and I think on part of that, you kind of took it to the path that I was going to.
Yeah.
If you just look at, you know, total cost of ownership
Yep.
on that graph, you know, alternative 2 for our own system was 21
Right.
and change, and alternative 3 was 19.5. So that's why I was curious, looking at alternative 3, to bump it up to, say, at least that 75% to be equivalent to our own system, you know, how close are those two actually then?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, if you're looking at just that pure percentage, it's going to get very close to, you know, probably alternative 2 in terms of that cost. So the costs are again relative. I think the goal here was really to differentiate between alternative 3 and 4 on the cost. But yes, could you, you know, alternative 2 and 3, they're, as it is, they're not that far apart. Alternative 1 we already discussed is a complete, it's in a different ballpark altogether in terms of cost. But yeah, once you get into, you know, the real differentiation between alternative 2 and 3, aside from the cost piece, is really the ownership piece, right? It's really, do you want to have your own system and not? And now, as Louis said, to do apples to apples, and again, it wasn't part of our scope, but alternative 2, this is not Trump, this is Trump. So with alternative 2, if you start going to Trump, it's more, you might add cost here with the coverage, but here you're going to probably get closer to WACO once you add all that trunking functionality to really have an apples to apples comparison. But they're all, you know, they're all in the same ballpark, but just the VHF one is totally different.
And then if we did go for alternative 2,
Yeah.
say if 10 years down the road,
Yep.
we decided at that point, we want to go trunked,
Yep.
would a lot of that infrastructure be compatible to make that a switch over?
Yes. Yes. So the trunk, the conventional to the trunk is really, as Louis mentioned, is a lot of controller equipment, a lot of software. So as long as the hardware you have at the time, and again, when 10 years is a long time, but
Yep.
you definitely, I get the intention of your question. Absolutely, it should be possible, unless that vendor that you purchased from for some reason says, oh, we don't support that hardware for our new quote-unquote trunking release, which is possible, but more likely than not, you should be supported.
I just looking at a little longer range plan as things
Right.
grow.
Yeah, you can, because yeah, once you build out the sites, and I guess the other, and I don't know exactly the terms of Cresa and WACO, but if you build out with them, and I've seen it with other systems, that's why I'm kind of bringing this up. You know, and actually I've seen this with Phoenix and Mesa, I'm from the Phoenix area. They had a system, they had a divorce plan when they did a combined system, and they actually did the divorce about 5-6 years, maybe 7 years later, and now they operate 2 separate regional systems. So because you're bringing your own assets and hardware, it's not like it's a sunk cost, as long as, to your point, at some point you say, oh, this has worked out for 7-8 years, it's not going to work out longer, I'd rather just take my assets and build my own trunk system. It's leverageable. What's not leverageable is if you start switching bands. So, you know, alternative 2, 3, and 4, there's definitely leverageable things. Alternative 1 is you make that investment, you know, you're not going to be able to switch bands.
I think my last question would be, I see if we went to alternative 3 or alternative 4, it included adding a new site in the Chapman area. And part of that, if I read it correctly, the link would go from one of our current sites up to Bald, and then Bald to Buck is a relay. Which unfortunately we know that for 10 plus years, Bald has been a big issue and it constantly goes offline. Due to whether it's snow on trees or other things. So it seems to me that it'd almost be like whether it be the skyline down the road or something else, would have to be some other type of hop.
Yep.
Where, like I said, looking at 10 years,
Yep.
the trees are only gonna grow taller.
Right.
You know, that site has slowly been getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And we can see it in our current system performance.
Got it.
So we had multiple conversations about site selection on the report, all knowing that if it push comes to shove and the board selects vendor X, whatever it is, all of that comes off the table and you really design the system and you look for performance. And so some of this, going backwards a little bit, about in-building, where Rajit said you could make changes with low-cost sites to improvements. So that's all in that consideration. Is really what we're looking for is performance and coverage. And so to some of the other conversations that centered around performance questions, concerns, based on the conceptual maps, we're looking for 95% coverage, portable, at the hip, at 3.4. And there was concern about, well, if you average the county across, you could be 75, 85, 90 in one area and 10 or 20% in a rural area, and you still meet the average. Well, as is explained, we can break the entire county into quadrants and have different standards or same standards that need to be met in each quadrant. So you don't get disparate and one community has better than the other. In-building is in-building, and our commitment for those facilities that have in-building systems today, VDAs, we would replace those with the new technology. So,
Well, I know, and one of the big concerns with law enforcement is in the rural, middle of nowhere,
Right.
being able to get out, having access to the system. And getting back to my thing, just talking about that link for Chapman, as the report says, alternatives of fiber or whatever lease lines. Well, we know that CenturyLink, or what they call them now,
Yeah.
they keep changing,
Yes.
doesn't have fiber going up there.
correct.
And
We discussed that.
and they
FD I
really, don't have
discussed
lines to lease that
Right.
goes down all the time. So
Yeah.
it
It
wouldn't
would
be
be hard to get
it's
that
not a
one.
reliable option.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
I have a question with relation to VHF.
Yes.
Is it a dying technology that there's not much R&D being put into it? I mean, in other words, is there any way to boost what we have and make it where we want? Or is the technology just dying and we just need to move forward? What's the general
It's not-
consensus?
So good question. It's not, so I want to be clear. It's not the technology itself. So VHF, you can get P25, Phase 1, Phase 2 trunked systems. All these vendors can. Well, most of the vendors, the big ones, definitely can do that. So the technology itself is not the issue with VHF. VHF has many pros, as I'm sure many of the users already know within the district. The issue with VHF that has led many agencies to veer off it is the congestion issues and the interference issues. Because of the way it was laid out, like I mentioned, where there's no transmit receive, and of course it was the first spectrum that was really in use in public safety throughout the country. It really didn't lend itself well when an area got congested or there was multiple interference possibilities in an area. There's really no way to remedy that in a very, you can do it on a one-off basis, but when it becomes holistic across all your sites, it becomes a real issue. So that's led people to go to different bands. Initially it was UHF, and now over time it's been 7,800. So it's not that they offer a better quote-unquote technology. Now there is different characteristics to each band, and I'll just quickly kind of lay it out. VHF works very well for very wide areas. It's a very large signal. It can propagate further on average if it's a flat plane, which I know obviously you're not here, but it can typically propagate further than some of the other frequencies. What doesn't work as well because of the size of the signal is in-building penetration. At 800 megahertz through those smaller windows can easily penetrate. A VHF signal has more difficulty. So there is propagation differences, but the biggest issue is really that not the technology or it's antiquated, just it was the first spectrum that was fully deployed that hadn't been well planned. And it's got to the point now over all these decades that in certain areas of the country, I mean, you can't even, this is still not as bad, but there are certain areas you just can't even consider VHF because it's so noisy, it causes so much degradation of the performance of the system because there's just so much noise in the noise floor of the VHF signal.
So is there anybody trying to improve the handheld or so you can get through the windows, or is there anything like that that can be done?
No, not with VHF. And one of the other things we just talked about was the tower top amplifier. We can't do that really with VHF as well because, which would again help a signal, but then the problem is it doesn't work well with VHF because of the characteristics of it. You can use a tower top amplifier for UHF, for 700, for 800. It really helps with the portable talk-in coverage, especially, but VHF it causes more issues than help. So that's one of the reasons that systems are typically not designed with a tower top amplifier for VHF, but they are for some of the other frequency bands. So it's really the characteristics of the spectrum, not a limitation of the technology.
And Sean, I would just say real world, right now we have interference from Tacoma. We have interference from Goldendale. We have interference from, is it Santiam Sheriff Office? What is that? It's on TAC 3, I know, on the receive. But
I thought it was Lynn. But
Lynn, somewhere down there. We have Albany, because of how well VHF performs. And those are, high power mountaintop units that are going to be a lot stronger than our little portables trying to access into the system, or even us trying to receive things at times. Which, when you say spectrum rise, correct me if I'm wrong, but 900 wouldn't travel that far.
Right.
Which is why you're
the higher you get in the spectrum, the less it further,
Which is why they were able to put those amplifiers to make the hearing a lot more sensitive than it is on the VHF side. Because on VHF, all you're doing, you're just amplifying more garbage.
Yeah, exactly.
If it's noisy, you're just making the noise louder.
Exactly.
Or at least at the 900, it's a nice quiet floor to begin with. Or 700, 800.
800, yeah, absolutely. And 700 that way is the best because it's the kind of the newest for public safety. So it's the best plan. They've tried to allocate actual frequencies to different counties within the state, and so it's very well planned. And 800, of course, has been there longer, but as I mentioned, it's almost treated as the same band from a purchase standpoint.
Mine is talking about harmonics and blending of channels and
exactly
all the stuff that VHF causes us.
Exactly. So VHF, yeah, exactly. So this is really the characteristics of the spectrum more than anything that you can do. Because even if you did everything perfectly in the district with VHF, you can't stop these external carriers coming in. I mean, you can try. It'll take years with each one, most likely, because it's just the unfortunate situation. And because VHF propagates so well, as was mentioned, that those come from much further than if it was on 800 or 700. You don't get the signal out as far.
I have one more question as far as if we partnered with one of the other two agencies, what are the ages of their systems, and as far as where are they in their potential look to upgrade or?
So I don't know, Louis, if you remember the exact dates. I do recall the WACO was newer in the sense that it upgraded to this P25 Phase 2, and CRESA was a little more dated in the sense of it's still Phase 1, and I think they haven't done that upgrade. However, I don't know where they are because, as I mentioned, they each have these system upgrade plans with Motorola, so they are upgrading their servers and their routers and switches. But my sense is, and correct me if Mike might know, or Louis, that WACA is a bit newer than the CRESA.
in fact, WACA hasn't turned on their new system yet. They keep pushing back their cutover date, and it's in fact, even my document says December, but it's been pushed back to January already.
Okay.
So it will be brand spanking new as of January when they turn it on. CRESA's is an older generation, but one of the advantages, and it's all tied to money, but it is an advantage, is, as Rajit said, that both of those systems have a plan with Motorola for, I think it's a 10-year period of a constant system upgrade. It's already built into the fees, so you're not being surprised with, oh, we're going to upgrade our servers next month and it's going to be $400,000 hit for you. It's already built into their costs. There's also some other advantages to those two systems, is that their core, which is the brain of the system, is redundant. And in the case of the WACA system, it's 4 times redundant. The core is by itself, a Motorola core has it's a mirror. You have two systems in a system. The WACA system has 2 cores, and they're geo-redundant. They're 30 miles apart from each other, and so each core has 2, so it's 4 times redundant.
Can we hear from Bruce or Shelley? Any comments, questions?
No, I don't have any comments. I'm just absorbing and learning and taking it in.
Okay. Bruce, how about you?
No, I don't have any comments. It's been quite educational, though.
I will say that, directors, I believe this is obviously a first step and much more, no decisions, obviously. We're not ready to pick an option by any stretch. I foresee a lot more engagement. I would like to hear what you have to say, Mr. Miller, if you just give me a minute, with the stakeholders and, a work session. Lots to do, and we definitely appreciate the work. And I don't think I'm speaking out of turn there, directors, but we're a ways away from deciding on something. Mr. Miller.
Thank you, sir. I just have a couple of questions about the coverage maps that were included in the, I think you guys called it the coverage workshop. So from what I review here, and I have them for reference if you need them, but from what I see here, there was a P25 VHF solution that was looked at during the coverage workshop. And during that, the maps that were provided indicate that the portable talk-in coverage was 73.5% using P25 VHF. Moving over to analog, which is in the report, made it into the report, it goes to 60%, provided it is analog and not P25. So one of my questions is why the VHF P25 solution did not get included in the final report. And I'm just going to go through this as it all relates to
That's because it wasn't in our scope.
Okay, thank you. And then also looking at the coverage workshop too, the numbers that were in the coverage workshop maps, again, VHF P25 was 73.5%, 700 megahertz was 75.2%, but in the report it went down to 71%. And then the Caressa system in the coverage workshop maps were 74.4%, but in the report it went down to 60%. The other thing that I noted too in the coverage maps was that the VHF scenarios and the 700 scenarios both use the Bald Hill that we know doesn't have the reach that Buck Mountain does. There's definitely some performance differences there. However, when you looked, at least in the coverage maps for the workshop, the Buck Mountain was used. Bald Hill was not. So that inherently made the coverage go up. And I want to also let everybody know too that in the final report, Bald Hill was used consistently across the same thing. But I just did notice that in the coverage workshop, we were using Buck Mountain, which has an elevation of about 2100, and the reach we know from our testing and everything else we've done in the past is a lot bigger reach. Bald Hill is significantly less. And that was a site, Bald Hill was a site that was used for the VHF and 700 solution. So theoretically, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I would think that if Buck Mountain was used for the P25 VHF solution or the 700 solution, these 73.5 and 75.2 numbers would actually probably go up. My guess is closer to 80%. I know it's a lot to digest, I
Yeah,
apologize.
well, I can only speak to the constellation of sites that were used in the coverage work, that's why it's a workshop, is because we would get feedback about what's feasible and what's not. So the coverage maps that are in the document were a culmination of that. So I absolutely agree with you, some of the percentages might have gone down because the constellation of sites that were feasible just were working out. So what happens, Adam Nelson, who's our coverage specialist, he goes and just looks at all the potential sites and he brings it to the workshop, and he probably had designs that were 80+%, and just the feasibility because of the constellation of sites that were used was just not there. So I personally don't know the exact specifics of each one, but I can tell you that's our typical design goal, is to obviously meet the requirements, but also do it with a set of sites that's feasible, which is the goal of the workshop, is to get the stakeholders together and get the feedback as to, hey, we would love to have this constellation of sites because it hits this, really high number, and then people start saying, oh no, there's no space on that tower, or there's no space in that shelter, or that lease is a nightmare, so we need to get off that site. So that's kind of how it evolves. And so is there a way to get coverage higher? Absolutely, and I've made that statement blanket across all the alternatives. It's just that was based on the feasibility of using sites, given the constellation of sites for each alternative.
Thank you, and I just want to clarify one of the discussions related to a question that Mr. Clark had, and it was about the in-building coverage, and I just want to clarify that BDAs and DAS systems can be used on VHF spectrum to increase the in-building coverage for VHF. That conversation to me was unintentionally a little bit,
I don't think we talked about BDA or DAS. I was talking about tower top amplifiers at the time. Yeah, BDA and DAS, those are the in-building systems, those are across spectrum. I'm talking about the tower top amplifiers at a RF site, that typically you will not have VHF because you basically amplify the garbage, the noise.
Yeah, no, I understood.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify because of the way that he asked this question, I felt like he was asking, is there a way to increase the, talk out from in the building? And so I just wanted to clarify.
Oh, yeah,
that.
yeah. If you start
Okay.
putting DAS and BDAs at each building, absolutely. Of course, it drives up the cost, but yeah, you can, of course, improve the in-building coverage. That's true for all bands. I want to make sure it's not just VHF. It's true for everything.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And I just want to clarify or just kind of get your feedback on a couple other things. So the fire departments, correct me if I'm wrong guys, but the fire departments still use I refer to them as the pager radios. Is that still in use where, they look like pagers, but they're the actual radio for dispatch of incidents? Okay. So would it be fair to say that the pager radio, so when they get toned out on fire incidents, we're a small county, and so we don't always have, some of the smaller fire departments, again, correct me if I'm wrong, don't have personnel on duty at the station 24/7. So my concern in looking at this was, okay, well, what if we have a volunteer firefighter, EMP, or even a regular staff member that lives in this 40% uncovered area? They're not going to receive the dispatch on their pagers to even respond to an emergency. So that was concerning. And in relation to that, would it be safe to say that the mobile in coverage would be basically the coverage that would be expected on those pagers? I'm sorry, the portable out. Because they don't have antennas, they're like a portable radio, but they don't have an antenna. So actually, it would probably be less.
It's a little different. I don't know the exact parameters, but keep in mind the type of data that's going out on those pages it's a bit different. So there have to be paging maps created because and even an 800 trunk, as you know, there's Unication and a few other companies that have trunk pagers. So you would have some level of coverage. I can't tell you right now for sure it's going to be as good or equal, but it's typically the sensitivity and so forth is different than a portable, and it's also body loss, right? Because you have the antennas and so forth. So it depends on where the pager is and what type of pager it is, the parameters of that pager. But absolutely, could a pager be used in one of the trunk or different ban scenarios, absolutely. It's just a matter of understanding what that, to your point, what that coverage footprint for the paging is. Because yeah, we totally get, many of the counties we work with have volunteer fire departments, and they've run into these similar issues where they just can't afford, or they can't afford to be equipped with P25 radios that cost thousands of dollars. But that's absolutely a valid concern.
I just have 2 more questions, sir. Thank you. I appreciate your responses. So in the report, it shows that you guys are factoring a loss for body losses of 22.8 dB on VHF and 14.3 dB on 700 and 800. Is the dB loss calculation based on the frequency, or is there something else to that?
It's based on the spectrum, yeah. So we, Adam looks at basically the standards, the TSB 88 standards, and looks at the D5, I'm going to quote probably the wrong field, I think it's called D5. And they have body loss that are kind of industry standards based on the, and it's, like you said, based on the spectrum. So VHF, because of the characteristics of the propagation we talked about, has a larger body loss than the 7-800, and that's what he used in his parameters.
Thank you. Last, it's not really a question. I just want to, this is more of an educational piece, and you know, P25 has its benefits, right? That's the clear route to go. But I just do want to make sure that everybody that's listening does understand the difference in between analog and P25, in that if there's not ample signal with P25, you get nothing. There's no static, there's no crackling, there's no ability to even get a PTT ID from a unit for the dispatcher to know that, hey, this officer's been dispatched to a domestic disturbance and the radio's breaking. I might want to send more units up there to see what's going on. With P25, I'm kind of answering my own question. I'm sorry, please validate it at the end.
And they call that the digital cliff with the P25, right? Versus what
Perfect
you're talking
silence.
with the analog. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
It's absolutely
Clear
insane.
silence.
I just want to make sure that everybody listening knows that it is basically, I call it the all or nothing. You either have the audio and the break in the, we'll call it the squelch, or you have nothing. So when we look at coverage scenarios, we need to keep that in mind. That's my opinion anyway.
Which is, I think it references the 3.4 standard, right?
Right.
And also with that, as much as that is a downfall for digital, the plus side is, it means as long as those packets are going out, it's usable until you hit the cliff.
Exactly.
Unlike where VHF, it's that constant, you hear every third or fourth word.
Yeah,
You
and
just
don't know
can't make
what's
it
getting
out.
back also at that point with that. You're absolutely right.
Um,
What's getting back to the dispatch.
Last, and one thing just want to mention is some people are getting this report for the first time and they start looking at the maps. If I recall right, I see the map for our current system, it has 50 watt radios for mobiles, which I'm guessing is a Unity antenna going out. And just for if anyone's looking at that map and trying to say how well does this map match our current, for how well the maps work, is the understanding that if you're running the original equipment that CCOM provided with this radio build, those were only 35 watt radios with a Unity antenna, so it's going to be less. Now a lot of the end users have bumped up, and whether they're using a 2.5 dB gain antenna, so they're putting out at 60 or 70 watts, or a lot of them have gone on to 100 watt radios and have throttled back on the duplex channels to 50 watts.
Right.
So there might be a little bit of disparity if people look at what says our current map is, and then when they try to take that and say, hey, this doesn't match what my coverage is. There's a few reasons for it.
Are there KMZ files for the coverage maps?
Did Adam send you any KMZ files by any chance?
Yep, I got those late
Got
last
those.
week.
All right. Well, thank you very much. More to come on this, obviously, and I know we'll be working closely with the users and the user group, and appreciate the work to date. And I'm sure we'll probably be seeing some of this in part of full again here. At this point, I'd like to entertain a 10-minute break here. We can let you guys get cleaned up and out, and Mike can debrief real quick. Take some bio breaks, get some snacks, and we'll come back here at 10:40, we'll say. So 8 minutes. How's that?
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is the Approval of the July 22nd and August 24th regular and special meeting minutes.
Kill that.
Entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, also move.
Excellent. Do I have a second? I'm going to second it. Boom, it's done. It's been moved and seconded to approve the regular meeting minutes from July 22nd and special meeting minutes from August 24th. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. The agenda. Here we go. All right. Next is the appointment of a new advisory committee member, SCAP Police Department Interim Chief Sean Davis. Is that right?
Correct.
That just
So move.
moved. All right.
Need a second?
Don't want to hog it. Second. Oh, good. Shelley seconded it. Moved and seconded to approve a new advisory committee member, interim SCAP Police Chief Sean Davis. All those in favor? Or any discussion? Sorry. No discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you. All right. Financial reports. Acceptance of the budget variance.
You have July and August in your package to approve, please. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
What would your question be? I'm kidding. I'm joking. You put it together, so.
Mr. Chair, on a roll here, go ahead and move to approve the budget variance report for July and August as presented.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Second. Thank you, Sean. It's been moved and seconded to approve the budget variances for July and August. Was that correct, Mr. Anderson? You both of them? Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you, Nancy. Jumping back over here, sorry, back and forth. The operations manager report.
Approval expenditures?
Oh, thank you. So excited. Approval expenditures.
Mr. Chair, I'll go ahead and move to approve check number 30305 through 30410, including electronic transfers for a grand total of $588,769.75.
It's actually 30411. There's kind of a little space.
Oh,
so
thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, 30411.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
You're welcome.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Moved and seconded to approve check number 30305 through 30411, including electronic payments and transfers for a total of $588,769.75. Any discussion? I do have one question. I see 3 different entries there for FE, unless there's more. How close does that get us to total for them as far as contract goes?
About done.
Okay. It was like, what was it, a little over 40 or?
And it was 79.
Yes, 71, 70.
Okay, on here there was like 40 something, I think. Was that right? Or okay. Okay. That was my question. Any others? Okay. Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
3 ayes. All those opposed? You abstaining, Bruce? We carried it. It's carried.
Sorry, we're having some technical difficulties.
Were you an aye or a nay?
I wasn't even sure what you're voting on. Sorry, my volume just went.
Okay, yeah, we were expenditures. We got the majority, so yeah, it was just the expenditures.
Okay, sorry about that.
All right. Okay, now we can do operations manager's report. Thank you.
So we have a new hire that started on the 1st of the month, so now we have 2 in training, which is good. We had a recruitment that closed on the 30th, currently going through the testing process. I will be doing interviews the 30th of this month with those. So far we have 5 who will be interviewing. And I also recently opened up a lateral process so that that's going to be continually open. And we have a lateral applicant as well. So moving along. And then just the other update, we're getting ready to go into contract negotiations, even though it feels like we just finished them. So we're starting our first meeting on Monday. Last go around, we went basically through the contract with fine tooth comb. So we made a lot of changes, updates. So I'm talking with the union and so I'm not anticipating a lot of changes. So hopefully that'll help speed things along. But I just wanted to give everybody a heads up, especially the personnel committee, that we're going to be trying to schedule some appointments at some time in the near future. So it would be our goal to be able to make those happen sooner than later to get this wrapped up a lot sooner than we did last year. So just want to give everybody a heads up. It's coming up.
Excellent. Any questions? Okay. Thank you. And technical manager.
So we have the new dispatch consoles back by my office. We had 2 of the positions. We've been using it for training, and it's been going pretty well. We've just upgraded the training CAD, and so we're having people test it, make sure everything's working correctly before we vote as Magics to upgrade production. Network is a little outdated, so we've moved from 1 line to WACA for our CAD connection to 4 to WACA and 4 to Clackamas that are all redundant, and pretty much you could go snip the internet wires outside and we won't go down or even see a blip on our screen. So with all the Comcast internet outages and the CenturyLink, those shouldn't be impacting us anymore. We've increased our throughput about 10 times.
Wow.
Well done, Nathaniel.
Yeah. Thank you. Any questions? Thank you, sir. Okay, old business.
Old business. Dixie Mountain, so as in past meetings I've shared our ongoing conversations with the FAA. Just recently they did complete reviewing the updates that we provided them. They have since asked for additional drawings and itemized listing, so we're working on that. Nothing new on the alternate radio site other than what I just mentioned while the FE presentation, that WACA system upgrade is being pushed back. Right now it's January, so we'll see how that is. That does impact us in other ways, but I'll get to that. The next gen radio system, we just finish that presentation. Meisner site improvements. The surveyor has completed the staking of the site, the new footprint that completed a couple weeks ago. The front end documents from the construction manager we have received, and we're finishing reviewing those. The construction manager is planning to post bids within a couple of weeks. Again, this is going back to the WACA impact to even the Meisner site build is because we're getting surplus tower and a shelter from them, and those two devices are still up and running, and they expect decommission of those starting the first part of November. And our goal is to coordinate the start of civil work early November as well. Tow service contracts, all the documents have been provided to the county, and I haven't heard of an update on that. The ASA, the county health officer requested some statistical data from the district within the last week or so, and we've provided that. And then conversations continue with Cowlitz 911. Their interest in co-locating with us at our new Meisner site. Conversations just this week about starting the process of development of co-location agreements and leases. So, David, that'll come to your wheelhouse here in the fairly near future. We're still working on evaluation of us co-locating at their site in Longview. The last thing on here was the Quarry Hill theft. So no surprise, well, I guess it was a surprise. All things COVID related or whatever supply chain, we have been having significant issues with getting parts and pieces to complete that reconstruction of that site. So working with our insurance agent, keeping them apprised of where we are in the process. That's
If I
all.
can
Yes, sir.
ask you, with the current status of that site, how is that affecting radio performance in the area?
That site is up and running. The challenge is if we lose commercial power, it will go dark because there is no transfer switch. Again, that's another piece and part that's out there.
I thought the generator was complete, the transfer switch was for a redundant generator.
Yeah, the generator just got finished being repaired.
So the radio site is fully functional for RF.
Correct.
It's just the infrastructure for backup power is still in progress.
Correct.
Thank you.
That concludes old business.
Can I ask you something on the tow contracts?
Yes.
I think you'd reported at one of the last meetings of the abandoned vehicle thing. Did it get any legs? And
I've had conversation, but we had a follow-up meeting with County Commission, Public Works, and law enforcement about that. And so everybody's on the same page. It's really in the county's house right now of a solution for both abandoned and tows in general. They have a copy of all of our existing tow contracts, and they're developing their own to take over that process. New business? Yeah. New business. So I have before you a package. It's Day Wireless. It is for the approval of this new lease. As going backwards just a little bit, we did have a lease with them for a 20-year period that expired, and we've been working with legal counsel to get us up to speed on a new one. We have an end goal. We don't want a long-term lease for that site because A, it's expensive. We're not positive that it will be utilized or be beneficial to us with a new radio system and what spectrum that would be, so we didn't want to get tied into a long-term lockdown lease. So we worked with legal to get us the best deal that we could get, which is what it is. So this new lease is $24,300 per year. I still have concerns with that, of course, but also the annual accelerator is locked at 4%, which I have issues with, but that is what it is. We have a back due rent amount of $12,150. So the staff is asking for board approval to sign this lease.
Mr. Chair, also move for discussion.
Second for discussion. Go ahead, Mr. Anderson.
I was gonna say, if I recall right, this has been a tough pill to swallow. Not thrilled with the fiscal impact of this lease, but Eric, if you can bring me up to speed, how was this decreased from the original?
Well, that would be legal counsel being the pit bull for us. And I don't know what what the details were, but yeah, it has decreased some, but
basically, I just want to point out that this isn't like just a blank check. This has been on. You've been working on this for quite a while, and
A few months, yeah. The pitch with Day, obviously there were a couple things we appealed to. One is the relationship that the district has had for a long time. Two is the history behind the site itself and the fact that 20 years ago the district had invested a lot in the actual equipment. And that went so far, but what they were really, really high centered on was the term. And so getting a figure that would have been lower would have been possible, but that's where we got into, we need more than a 1 year with an opt-out in 30 days. So I think at some point, Mike and I talked and we decided, we want to keep have whacking at this and the costs that come with that, or do we want to just suck this up and know it's going to be a year, and the Meisner side looks at least promising.
Mm-hmm.
So it was going to be 5 years is what they wanted, and that obviously would be much worse for you in the long run if in fact Meisner works out.
right.
So you said 1 year.
So the terms, our takeaway, the benefit for us is, we're paying more, but we have a 1 year term that we're locked to, but then it's really month to month, and we have a 30-day opt-out. So that's the advantage that we're taking away from this. So if something pops open and the Cowlitz site is a good match for us, then we'll have the flexibility to move quickly. That's relative.
And do know that in the discussions you've had, if it sounds like that site is going to be maintained and used, are we stuck with
Our Columbia site?
with the agreement?
Yeah,
here?
yeah.
Are they in agreement to reopen, to renegotiate for longer term at a discount?
I got an email to that effect from yes, Bethany. Yes, indeed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
So pretty much this is kind of our insurance to, in case we vacate, we're not locked into something we're not using.
Right.
Correct.
Yet if we end up using it, we can go back in and renegotiate for
I
a
think
lower
if we
long
were
term.
ready to do something that was within that 5, maybe 3 year ballpark, the price would be different.
Yeah.
And Bethany had I asked that specifically. I said, look, if this doesn't work out, what you're buying here is the flexibility.
Yes, correct.
Yes, that is true.
Thank you.
Any other? Bruce or Shelley, any comments? Well, we do have a motion and a second to approve the tower site lease agreement from Day Wireless as presented here. Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, all those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you. In your packet is a quote from Entrance Controls. So this is something that you become complacent. This is our facility. You don't think a whole lot about walking in and out of the door every day. But the front door is not ADA compliant, it never has been. It might be time to correct that. So before you is a quote to make the front door, we're talking the lobby door there, ADA compliant. And that is what you see in most commercial facilities, push button. It is tied to our security system, so we have the ability to control, but it's a quote for what you see there. It's the quote amount is $9,000. I don't have my glasses on.
$815 and 60
Thank you. 10% contingency, so not to exceed $10,797.16 is what we are asking for approval. There is a follow-up. There's funds available in our facilities account, so it's not an issue.
And we've determined this is the best approach as far as technology and
Yes, they're easiest.
it's amazing you say that too. As many times as we walk in and out of this building.
You just don't think about it.
I move. Go ahead.
Any issue with any access to the rest of the building?
No, once you get the public into the public area, then the secured area is a different animal, but
Alright, so pretty much it's just this room is the only other one.
correct.
All right, I'll make a motion to approve the installation of the ADA compliant door, front entrance door, with the quote from Entrance Controls for $9,815.60 with a 10% contingency.
Thank you.
I'll second.
All right, it's moved and seconded. Are there any other questions? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
I have one more thing.
Motion carries.
Yes, thank you. Sorry about that. One more thing. I should have mentioned this at the beginning of the meeting when you asked for additions to the agenda. We struggled. We got this document late yesterday afternoon, and then we had some technical struggles trying to get it formatted, but it did get uploaded to the website, and there is zero fiscal impact to the district, but I do need authorization to sign this purchase. So this is a Motorola Solutions. This is, in previous meetings, I've shared the conversations with State of Oregon, OEM, the 911 program, and Motorola for the replacement of our CPE. CPE is this customer premise equipment, otherwise known as the 911 phone system. So here's the long story. We're going backwards with the struggles that the state of Oregon had with tax collection and revenue for the 911 program. Our life cycle of our 911 equipment is really about 7 years. Our system is long in the tooth. We're at year 7, 8, and so we are past the life cycle, and the equipment technically is out of support. The state of Oregon offers very few options for CPE equipment. The current owner of the Vesta equipment is now Motorola, so you either deal with Motorola or you deal with Intrado with a Viper system. The district wants to stay on the Vesta platform because it serves our purpose and interest because of the availability of us to relocate to any of the other Magix partners They're all operating on the same exact platform, and we want to maintain that continuity and consistency across the Magix network. There are resellers of the Motorola system, so you can either go to Motorola Corporate Direct, or you can buy it through a reseller. Motorola offers the best price because resellers jack up the price or cover their costs, so it costs more. So working with the state of Oregon on this quote, working with Motorola, the cost to the state 911 program is $285,432.67. We, the district, are purchasing it, but it's all through 911 tax funds, so there's no fiscal impact to the district. So staff is asking for authorization approval to sign off on this purchase agreement between Motorola and the 911 district.
Again, the key point being no fiscal impact.
Zero.
Is we cut the initial check and we get reimbursed by the state afterwards?
Nope.
Or does the bill go directly to?
Goes directly to the state.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I'll move to propose move to approve the Motorola CPE as presented.
All right, moved and seconded to approve the Motorola CPE as presented here. Any discussion? I'm hearing no discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Wow, nice. Okay.
Have a COVID update. So, no news to anybody here also. There's a pandemic out there. What? It's been going around for a year and a half. And as you all recall, the district has been riding that surfboard for 18 months, and we opened up the facility. However, we are watching the infection rates both nationally and locally. The district has been impacted by COVID. We have had staff infected previous at the onset of COVID, and we currently have impacts taking place today. We're concerned about that, of course. So this meeting was scheduled. It was an important meeting, so we opted to maintain an open meeting for today, but at the conclusion and as of tomorrow, Columbia 911 facilities will be closed to outside visitors, including friends, families, and user agencies. That being said, we have let, as we have in the past, when there are technical issues that need services from technical services here, we let those people either in to deal with Chandra or Nathan, but day-to-day visiting, that will be closed again. All future meetings and until further notice will be held virtually. We will not utilize this room for public meetings. Masks are also being, we're back to our mask policy, which is all common areas. Masks are mandatory. Staff that have their own offices don't have to wear them when they're in their own office. That is subject to change depending on circumstances. Again, we're back to being diligent about maintaining social distancing and ensuring that cleaning is taking place frequently and efficiently and effectively. On the horizon, this is big for staff, obviously. We're watching closely with both the federal and state vaccination mandates conversation. We're waiting for some kind of crystal ball clearing so we can see what that really means. We have legitimate concerns if that is, we're in conversation with our labor attorney, we're in conversations with SDAO. But we would have a significant impact if we're mandated to vaccine or termination. That would be a conversation I'd need to have with the board. And that is the conclusion of new business. And
Mike?
sir,
That's right. On that, of course, respectively, don't need any details, but what percentage of our floor personnel in the comm center have been vaccinated?
agency-wise, I'll say that we're in the mid-70s. That's good. That's great. If we had to lose people because of the vaccine mandate, the impact on the admin side is about 12.5%. On the operations floor, 33+%.
And Mike, you're saying we would fall under the federal mandate?
Because of how we receive some of our funding is through grants and allocations via the state, federal, we fall under the federal mandate. And we question that, but that's coming directly from SDAO.
Okay. Is that a bridge we're going to cross when and if that comes? Or
I don't know, because staff is very concerned about it, which I totally understand, but we just don't have the answers. We're just waiting like everybody else. What are the rules? What are the limitations? What are the options? We don't know yet. We hear rumors, but there's nothing in writing yet.
I think as a special district, as a part of two special districts, it would be really nice if they were forward-thinking or helping us a little more with this. I'm sure they're probably scrambling as well, but it'd be nice to know that how others are dealing with it, and so we could hopefully copy that.
Yeah.
All right, more on that to come, I suppose.
Has SDO advised you, are they expecting any of the recent challenges to be addressed to see if that may cause any stays in the near future?
Well, I think that's exactly what's going on, why it's so quiet, because there are challenges, both on the federal and on the local state level. So I think that's all part of the conversation. Don't know.
All right. Director updates.
Really, I have nothing else to share. Of course, I'm always open for questions. After the conclusion of this meeting, Shelley will be working with myself and David doing a new board member orientation. But that's really it.
All right. Okay, at this time, we are going to go into executive session under ORS 192.6602H to consult with legal counsel. Don't believe we have any decisions after the executive session,
Nope.
but we will come out of executive session to close out the meeting. And we'll take a couple minutes here. Okay, we are back into regular open session, and do we have any agenda items to discuss for the October 28th meeting at this time?
Just a reminder to the board, the October 28th meeting will be held at 1 p.m., 1300.
Let's check the calendar. Sure it's on there. 28th is a 1 p.m.er.
And the reason for that again is?
Because I have a conflict. I sit on the board at DPSST. That board meeting takes place at 9 a.m.
Did I hear, Sean, earlier you saying that as we progress with the radio engineering report, there would be a workshop? Is that typically to be scheduled?
Yeah,
or?
TBD at this point, yeah.
So that was the only thing I was going to add is based on your desire, request, order, I can work with federal engineering to coordinate a date and time that they're available to return, and then toss it out to the radio work group the user agencies, the advisory committee, and you. But that'll be a kabuki dance of coordinating schedules, but I'll be the point.
Okay. Okay, if there is, so let's talk about some member comments there. Shelley, you got anything you'd like to say for the good of the order for anybody? Something we kind of do at the end?
No, I don't think so. I'm just trying to get up to speed with everything and learn what we're doing, so.
Good. It's good to have you and finally meet you in 3D too, so. Mr. Anderson?
Nice to see a bunch of people in person once again.
Momentarily.
Seems so weird. Mr. Holsey?
Nope, I don't have anything, but thank you.
All right, and I will just say that appreciate the staff and trying to get through this COVID fun stuff. I know we're at the port we had written a policy, and of course it mainly just follows OSHA and CDC guidelines, but we felt like we had to put something in place just to deal with the vax and non-vax working together and some things. So I think it's still a breathing document, but it's definitely a convoluted issue for sure. Not an easy decision to make either way, and I just hope we can kind of do away with some of the divisiveness that occurs around it and just kind of move forward. So not more to say about that. No other business. We will adjourn the meeting.
Very good. Thank you. And Bruce, I will call you this afternoon.